Something, Mark.
Morning, Joe.
You all rested this morning?
We've been asleep.
All right. Let's go over, let's look at the different types of cabling, which is the part we didn't do in the chapter, pretty much, and talk about that briefly. What I need last year's attendance score. So I've got a variety of cables sitting here for y'all to look at, so y'all sort of pass them around. So this is the fiber, trying to remember on these things. Always remember which type tip, which type tip. So that this has got the ST tip on it, but it is fiber. It is not going to work for us, the cable here, because it has been rolled too tightly for one thing, and it's been bent numerous times, so it's got, if we were to check it, we'd find all kinds of breaks in the line. All it takes is just a crack in the fiber, and it's worthless. So if you bend it too tight, it's going to be a problem. Actually, I guess it's bound like somebody had it bound. I'm not sure what in the world they were using it for, that it was that tightly bound. But I got past it anyway, so there's a long piece of fiber, and it's just single strand here with straight tips on it, with the STs on it. Everybody follow on that? So if it was really hooked up to something that was running it through, we would not want to hold it up and point it at ourselves.
It's gonna shoot something? It's gonna like shoot.
Because it's running a laser beam through it, remember? Okay?
Be like looking at a barcode scanner or worse?
Worse, because you got to concentrate your small little spot there. This one is the same thing, except that it's got two pieces of fiber on it, and this has got the square tip, so it's got the SC on it, so it's got the different connector on the ends of it. But otherwise, same type of thing as you had right there. So you've got two different type connections going around to y'all. So y'all can see both of those. Another piece of fiber here.
And the fiber is just like the little, that's plastic, right? It's just that little tiny piece right in the middle about the size of
In the
a
middle,
push pin.
which is actually what you're going to see on this one. This one's got them all, got it pulled out of it. So that this one on the fiber has actually got 6 strands within it. Okay? So you can actually see the individual little strand in there on these. And then it's got here that it's fiberglass type thing, and it's going to be not just pull string, but it's a support on it, so that when you run it, that this is keeping it from, because this will stretch much quicker when it gets warmer or whatever, because this is to keep it from stretching and breaking those strands in there. Okay? so to support it on it. So this one's actually a multi-strand piece of fiber for you. And that you can see all the little strands there, and y'all can see how small they are in this case. Okay, and that you, when you look at it, you'll realize you really can't see how small it is. Because actually what it's doing is smaller than a piece of hair running through there.
So repairing the fiber, you just basically slide it, pull off the sheath, and put the new casing back on.
You got to cut it off. Okay, and then, but you got to be real careful with the cutting, and then you got to grind the edges to put new on it. Although there's connectors out there that, and that you got to glue the connectors on normally, although there are connectors that don't require gluing on it. Because I've got one of those at home, but I've not ever opened the box for some reason. So it gets a lot more complicated putting connectors on fiber. But you're cutting it, and then you got to grind it, make it a smooth, clean cut on the glass on it, because there's actually glass sitting there for you. And then you make sure it doesn't have any shadow on it or anything. All right, next one is just a piece of coax on it with its connectors on there. So it's just a piece of coax cable for you to look at going around. It's got a strand running through the middle, and then it's got and I think I've got one in here that's actually cut on. That you've got a little wire strand runs through the middle, and then around the out, it's got a plastic piece around that strand, and then it's got a piece of metal shield that goes around the outside to send you the signal actually on that center piece and the other parts of the ground. And then it's got the plastic wrap around the outside. So you've got that one. All right, here I've got another piece of coax for you that's got some more connectors on it. On coax, when you ran it, if you remember I showed you running it along and it just sort of ended on both ends. Well, it sort of can't just sort of end there. It will actually have a terminator at the end of the line. Oops, if I turn the right button. So that's the terminator on it, okay? And there's a metal block that fits on the end of it that ends the line so that they'll bounce the signals back, okay? Instead of them just suddenly disappearing. This also has here, so there's a terminator here for you. There's also a T connector here for you, which is where you would put that in the line as you go along, like it does right here, and you drop off the wire going to the individual machines. Now follow on that? So that's how you got it where we had each of those machines running off there was with this T connector right there, and they would plug into here to it. Okay? Again, this is just a smaller, the RG2, I believe. On it's not the 5. So this isn't the backbone cable actually. This is actually the cabling like you would run to the machines, but you could run it as semi-backbone along there too, but it's not as strong and as good a signal going across. In the class, somewhere in the next couple of weeks, y'all are going to learn how to do the plugs on there. So here's a piece of Cat 5 cable that's got the plugs on it, just like y'all are going to do. Okay? So that's all that is. It's Cat 5, so there's 8 strands in here, 4 pairs. But they're all just loose inside them. Now, Cat 6. Now, which is what stuff's going to currently. Although you're installing a lot of Cat 5 still also, but you could use Cat 6, which will give you faster speeds through. Cat 6 still has the 4 strands in it, just like we did on Cat 5. but it has this piece going down the middle that the strands all go around, and this separates them out, and so you can run higher speed through the Cat 6 on it. Because of that running down through there, you're not going to be able to bend this as much as you could the Cat 5 cable. Does everybody follow that part? And all it's doing is it's just holding them in position on here and actually separating them, and there's plastic between them, so then you've got some shielding between each pairs on it. As far as putting the plugs on it, it's going to be the same way as you do on 5. It'll be the same exact wiring and plugs. So, okay, so they may be a little wider to allow for this part on. That's a piece of Cat 6. I don't have anything of Cat 7, Cat 8. They're just improvements off that. Although I was just reading on those yesterday. Couple of more here. Fiber connections and ones that people put on there, and I think actually one of these connectors on here is one I put on there. That an instructor in another school that showed me how to do them years ago gave me a couple of extra cables. But don't ask me exactly how to do those still today, because I really don't remember. And that's, he just went through and had us do and showed us real quickly that. These are fiber connectors waiting to be installed on one, so that you can look at and see what it is as they're in raw format right here that you'd be working with. All right. Other one I'm going to mention to you here is we talked about token ring in here. And as Heath made the comment, token ring had its own unique cabling and wiring, plugs and wiring to it. It had a much thicker wire to it and had much larger wires that were involved. It's got 4 wires inside that cable, so it's not 4 pairs but 4 wires, and they're thicker, more like electrical wires. With the token ring, IBM did several interesting things on it. That you had these unique plugs right there were the plugs for token ring. Now, as it went on through time, they actually went to where they could use that they did go to using RJ45 and the Cat 5 cables on it at that point, then later on to it, and so you had adapters later that did use the Cat 5 and used the RJ45 plugs on it. So actually what I've got here in my hand right now is adapters that went from the token ring plug to RJ45. Okay? And that then you could just use your regular twisted pair of connections instead of the special 4-strand bigger wires to run it through. These are relatively simple. I don't have just a regular plug anywhere up here. I do, but I don't have one that we can take apart. But they were easy to do, that they just opened up, you laid the wires in place, clamped the whole thing shut, and that was done. And you didn't have any fanciness, and they laid in certain positions. But the unique thing about these was that these plugs are different than any of the other plugs you're going to encounter. There was no male or female. They went together. They just work right there together. So that we can just plug 2 of these together, line them up right, and then plug in. And they're both identically the same plug. It helps if I squeeze the right ones to undo. So that was with the token ring of what was originally there. So y'all can look at those. Y'all can plug it in and unplug it as you pass them around. Because you just squeeze the little piece here, one or the other, and get them to where they free themselves out, and it will come apart. Okay? So just on the squeezing part, which is similar to what you do on the RJ45 plugs anyway, because remember you squeeze the little clip on there. In this case, we've actually got a piece of the cable in there, and it actually did feed into an RJ45 plug in this case that came out of this one and convert it to an RJ45 to plug into a regular, that we could plug that back into there, and we could use our token ring wiring that we already had. Now, in most cases, people were putting the twisted pair wiring in and then getting it to convert like those did. And here's another one of those that's got that on there. So I got several of those that I ended up with. So originally, when I wired Swainsboro Tech, the whole school, we did the whole school in twisted pair, but when we wired my classroom, where we were using it from the mid-80s on an AS400, which used token ring on it, that we actually had token ring cabling around my classroom. And we had run to a couple of other spots off of that. But then when we went to networking the whole school, we went to the twisted pair. The similar thing that I already passed around to you right there. Well, hand me back one of those. One plug back. So then, I mentioned the MAL to you, which is what this is. Okay? Using that token ring plugs on it. So these just plug right in there, and that is plugged in. Again, if you look at these, you're thinking these are the female plugs sitting here on here. It's identically the same plug as what you were thinking was the male plug. Okay? And that's why you can just mix and match. There was none. It is token ring, so this one's got a ring in and ring out. That's what's going to give away to you if you're looking at a token ring unit versus a switch. Okay? And even you can get MALs that are all RJ45 plugs on them. So they'll look just like your switch, except for they've got these two additional ports on there, an RO and an RI, which is ring in and ring out. That allows us to connect to another MAL and to connect them together, because then we can go from ring in here to ring out on that one, ring out, ring in on that one to ring out on this one. And within here is your circle. So this plug leads to this plug, leads to this plug, leads to this plug, leads to this plug, and so on, and loops back to here unless we got stuff plugged in here, which breaks the circle to put the circle going to here. But open-ended here because it's going to close on another end. And so you've still got that big circle. Does everybody follow on that? Whereas in your switch boxes, they're just in a bus type situation inside the box. This has actually got a ring wired, approach wiring inside of it if we were to open it up. But that way y'all can look at an old mount. And that looks like that's everything that's in that bag.
Yeah, it does.
Okay? Now, on the fiber, besides the fact of us mentioning about the stringy stuff in there, that there is some type of strengthening material in there that's going to support it all, that's wrapping around it. It's going to be made of Kevlar, okay? What's Kevlar used for?
Bulletproof vest.
Bulletproof vest. It's working on the same principle there, that it's not got a stretchability to it, okay? That it's going to stay constant on it, so that's what they actually use as their strengthening material around it. The book puts it into you in the wording there about that the material used is often the same material used to produce a bulletproof vest. They used to tell you that it was Kevlar. Now they're not telling you that. Okay, but most people have heard bulletproof vest or Kevlar. But you do have the little piece of glass, or it can be plastic in some cases, but it's usually glass that runs through the middle that's got the hollow tube through it. Corning is a major maker of them. And they've actually split that off. The company sort of spun off the cookware business to where they just do more of just fiber plus optic type stuff now. But it's glass again, okay? And with the fiber, it could be either using lasers or it could use LEDs. If it uses lasers, it's going to travel longer distances than if it uses LED to transmit it. So it's possible that if you looked in the tube, that you're just looking at an LED and got no problem, but you may be looking at a laser, in which case you got a problem, okay? Because they'll sit there and cook you. There is single mode fiber and there's multi-mode fiber. Single mode fiber says we're sending a single signal through that tube. Now, when it does that, the object is it never touches the side of the tube as it travels through it. Okay? Multi-mode is sending multiple signals through it, and they're bouncing off the sides of the tube as it goes. So multi-mode is bouncing along the way off of the sides as it travels. Each of those different ones are traveling on a different angle, so that's where they all manage to go through this tube at the same time, multiple ones of them, without banging into each other, is that they're traveling at different angles through it and bouncing at different angles through the tube. Multi-mode's not going to go as far or as fast as single mode. So if it's shorter distances, you may well be using multi-mode, about like what you're watching them install down the roads and everything, with a single mode to go for miles on a straight transmission across it. Distances, you can go up to miles on that. You can go, I think it's 10 kilometers if I remember right, you can make one piece run, approximately. The fiber does get into some more additional things. With the cable, with the copper wiring, if you go back to coaxial, that you were limited on it quite tightly on its distances. Copper cabling is going to be subject to interference from electromagnetic interference that we've mentioned before. Crosstalk is also another factor on it, which is saying between those pairs that there could be interference from each other. And that's the reason you want to make sure when we're going to go through doing the plugs on there that we want to put the wires together correctly, because we want the positive and negative traveling on the same pair so they're canceling out their signal going outward. Okay? Everybody follow on that? And if you got them switched on it, they'll still work, but it won't work as well. And so your distance is going to be limited on how far you can make them do. Twisted pair, you can go 100 meters between points. And then at that point, you've got to have it regenerate and send the signal out again. Okay? It's going to drop off in weakness by then, because it's working just like headlights on the front of our car. They only shine out so far, but they don't just cut off at that point. They sort of start dimming all the way from the time they leave the car, but at a certain point, they get too dim to do us any good anymore. Okay? That's the same thing's going to happen with the copper. With the fiber, you don't have a problem of EMI. You don't have a problem of crosstalk because it's light signal going through there, so there's nothing else getting in there to interfere with it. Okay? Prior, I would have also told you that with fiber, that it is still very much more secure than copper. Copper, all we got to do is get near it with listening devices, and we can listen to what's going across there. Fiber, you can't just put some instrument near it and detect what's traveling through it, because you've got to actually receive that light wave. Follow on that? However, with the stuff they have made progress with, it is possible to cut fiber now and install in a quick amount of time a listening device into the fiber, unless they're monitoring it closely and then not catch it. Where in the past they told you were going to break the signal line for a decent little bit to stick something else on there, and that's when you give it away that somewhere there was a problem on that line. But now they're saying it is able, that people are able to install devices, cut that line and install a device fast enough now that it may not be fully detectable to give it away, where it would have been, people would have known stuff's not going across there when it got cut before. So I would still put it as highly secure on that, but there is the chance it could get cut and something else put on it, and if somebody's not monitoring it closely at that point, may not realize something really happened to it. So fiber's going to be much more secure. Fiber's also not subject to environmental factors on it. Now, the problem with fiber is it's not as easy to install, and you can't run it as easily in places because you can't do sharp turns in it. It's got to go gradually through its turns, sort of like it's watching them build roads and railroads. When they build the tracks for the railroad out there, to make that turn takes a whole lot more space than when we build the turn for the cars going down the road, that we can make an abrupt, sharp turn. For the train to do the same thing, it takes a huge amount of territory to make that same turn. Same thing's going to happen with fiber. Everybody follow on that? So it does, fiber gets more complicated and expensive in terms of installation on that. If you are using the twisted pair, it is 100 meters is the largest that you can run on the distance on a segment. Okay? So basically you can run a football field length with it. Fiber, like I said, you can run up to miles on it. Okay? And then you're running much higher speed across the fiber also. However, fiber's a lot more expensive, so we're not going to. You can actually run fiber to the desktop, except it's exceedingly expensive. Okay? More likely you're going to run fiber to the building and then run copper within the building. And twisted pair can be shielded or unshielded. Most of it is, you've got out there is unshielded. It's just got 4 pairs in there and the plastic around it. You can also get shielded twisted pair where it's got a piece of metal that surrounds it and then plastic around the outside of that on it. And then the Cat 6 has that trough, which was a word I couldn't think of a moment ago. That was that piece of plastic in the middle, running through the middle of it, separating the pairs and putting the barrier in so we can run higher speed on Cat 6.
Is that any kind of special piece of plastic, or is it just that much separation keeps it from crosstalking?
That cuts the crosstalking. Doesn't eliminate crosstalk, but it cuts it way down. And as long as you've set your plugs correctly on the end, you shouldn't have crosstalk coming across it. Okay? That is going to pretty much eliminate crosstalk for you. But it's not going to absolutely eliminate it.
So it just increases efficiency, but it doesn't increase like range. You can't get 110 meters, 150.
Range, no, it's not gonna make a difference on that, but it is gonna make a difference on the speed that you're running through it because you've not got that crosstalk interference, so now you can run a faster signal through the wireless. And you can actually, they're saying that you can get, we've been saying that if you're gonna do the gigabit, you can do that on Cat 5, but you should have Cat 6 when you're going to the 1,000 megabits on it. And that you can actually, now they're saying you're going to be able to go faster than that on copper, that you don't have to go to fiber to get the faster speeds. They've now developed ways to still do copper faster yet. Because everybody thought the 1,000 was going to be the max out for copper. When you go back to coax, I guess they really didn't give you well, they mentioned coax here, but they show you a little bit on coax, but they don't discuss much about it because coax isn't much used anymore. But there was 2 different speeds and types of the wire on it. If you got the bigger on it, which I think was RG5 if I'm remembering right, the letters is what's confusing me, 5 is correct. You could actually run strings of that 500 meters, but it was about that big a round cable. It was twice as big as what I passed around to y'all, over twice as big. And again, it wasn't very bendable because it had a big piece of metal running through the middle of it, okay? What ran to the individual machines was 2, which would go actually 180 meters on it. And when they put it onto the number of the cable, they rounded it up. Because 185, 200 is about the same thing, okay? And you can actually do the 100 meters. If you're in good environmental conditions, you can run a little bit longer with 100 meters, but 100 meters should normally work for you wherever on the twisted pair. So look on this. Should have on here what I'm looking for. Because this is thin net and the other was thick net. This is 2 thin net, but they don't tell me the other number I'm looking for on there.
RG6 maybe?
Huh?
RG6.
6.
That's a quad cable.
Switch 6 actually I think gets to the non-computer one.
RG59? RG59 and RG6.
One of those will work because also on coax, the other thing to be aware of, and this actually is for data communications. What cable used to use was a different coax, had a different amperage rating actually on it, and so you couldn't run data across what cable had out there. So for a number of years there, when people started using cable for their internet, they had to rerun in your wire and your wiring into your house to put in the correct type of coax cabling that would support data instead of just the video going across it. The RG59 is the smaller one. RG6 maybe the other.
Is it heavier?
Is the
I don't
heavy
think
one.
that's the big backbone cable though. I don't.
Look for thick net. Somebody do a search on thick net. Because that will give it to us right there. That's it. 10 base 5. The other was 10 base 2, which meant you could do 10 megabits per second on it, okay? Which is the speeds things were until we got into a really twisted pair. You don't get see the numbers on that, do you?
The RG cable similar to RGA.
But they've dropped it out of the book, so y'all really don't have to know it anyway. Okay?
Let me ask you something about that token ring.
Mhm.
Is the ring in, ring out just to connect other?
That's to connect, to take,
Other MAUs?
to take this box and then have another box still on the same network, and we could do what it was. There's a maximum number of devices you could put on a network, but we could have, it was like 64 from thinking we could connect 8 of these together. But then when you had done 8 and you needed more connectors, you got another box, but you had to use both of these connectors to connect to the other because you just enlarged your circle.
Well, let's say you're just doing 5 computers, you're just gonna use 1 through 5, and the ring's made in there, right?
The ring's made in there, so you're not worried about these two.
They don't actually have to go computer to computer like it.
Because the ring's in here. Because this is actually, this goes from here to here to here to here to here to here to here, back to here. This is what's happening inside here. Now the switch, they're all separate, hanging off of that one connector coming into the box. Actually, in the switch, it's actually got a smart thing sitting there thinking on what gets sent out to each. On the hub, you actually were just like the wires all ran together.
And there's no programming or anything, like a switch you can program, you can't do anything with that, just plug it out.
This is like a hub.
Yeah, okay.
This thing's dumb. Okay? The hub's dumb also. All the hub did was gave you a nice way to connect all the wires together. I'll mention that one to you then too. With the hub, you were just connecting all the wires together. They were literally just as if you brought them all in and wired them all together. Just you had a nice little method to keep them all straight. They had plugs all in the end plugged into a box that did nothing. Okay? Which meant if you had multiple devices running off that hub, the speed to each device's effective speed was how many ever devices were running on there divided into the total speed you had going into. So if we had a hub and our network was running at 100 megabits per second, and we were using a hub, and we had 10 devices on it, our effective speed for each of the devices was not 100 megabits per second, but was 10 megabits per second. More devices that were hung on the hub, the slower the speed. We only had one device running off that hub, we got full speed. Y'all follow on that? Because they were all just sharing it together. Everybody saw everything. Okay? If we got a switch, same rules, our effective speed is 100 megabits per second, slightly below it. It's just marginally off because there is the delay for the basically computer inside the switch, the intelligence in there that looks at it and says, does it belong on which port, and it only sends it out that specific port. So then each of the devices' effective speed is the full speed. So if you replace a hub with a switch, their network is going to speed up just by putting that intelligent device there. And from the user's viewpoint, they can't really tell anything. It looks like it's identically the same setup for the network, because the switch and the hub both look the same on the outside. The difference is what's inside. The other part is most of your hubs were not powered hubs. Now a powered hub did give you a little bit more speed because it had a little bit of power. It would regenerate the signal when it's sent out stronger on it, so it didn't lose quite as much on it, but still lost. The passive hubs literally worked what we just put up there. And then the switch, it has to be powered because it's sitting there doing its intelligence in it and sends out the information. Now, the switch could be powered off of the Ethernet connection, depending on the switch. On some modern switches now, because it doesn't take a lot of power to run that, and they can actually run off the power coming through the switch and do power over Ethernet. Okay? And you've got some other devices out there also that will power over Ethernet, that will run off the power of the network connection to it and not need separate electrical power to it. You've actually got some now wireless ones that can pull it off through the air for the power to run themselves. Off the signal coming through the air will give them some power. and where they're needing very minimal amount of power to run the device. That one's a really weird one to make. But you do have those out there.
Will
Okay.
the mouth for the token ring get the same power through the connection?
Because this one was running just, there's nothing happening in here. This is just a mechanical device sitting here. So there's no thinking inside this thing. All it is just wire. If we took the cover off, we'd just see wire in it. There's no chips or anything else in it. It's a dumb device. It was just a wiring piece there. Other than the signal goes from one to one to one, but that's because that's the way the wire's been there. This plug wires to this plug wires to this plug wires to this plug. So the signal has to go from one plug to the next plug to the next plug. And if there's something plugged into it, it actually won't go from 3 to 4, 5. When it goes from 3 and it hits 4 because there's something plugged in it, it goes to whatever's plugged into 4 and comes back and goes to 5. It can't just jump on across there from in here. It goes out there, comes back and goes. So when you plug something in there, you effectively just broke the connection across that spot. That's got to pass out and back in. All right, any questions on all of that part? Y'all got the difference between the cables and stuff? And then fiber gives us the much faster and the approach on it. Copper is easier to work with, and we're going to do the copper in here. We're getting supplies for doing fiber, and then I have to go back and get somebody to teach me one day fiber to be able to teach all the fiber connections on it. But it's more complicated to do that. So they show you those. The BNC connector is the female connectors that we had on here. And you see there's about 3 different names those have. The BNC, everybody agrees on, but what BNC stands for, there's about 3 different interpretations of that out there. British Naval Connector is the one that's most often given, but there's a couple others that people think it is, and nobody's really sure what BNC came from. I'm going to show you the terminator. Another problem on copper to remember is it is an electrical hazard. When an electrical line falls on it, you've got full electrical going through that wire. So if you're working on the copper on it, that if somebody suddenly drops it into contact with an electrical wire, you've got 120 volts or 240 volts or whatever coming at you through that wire. Okay? So to be aware that that's a possibility out there too. Fiber, you don't have to worry about it because electricity can't travel down that fiber. Okay? So you've got a different situation on that. Big difference as you get to the higher categories of the twisted pair is the number of twists that are in the pair per inch is what starts becoming significant. Also, when they went from Cat 3 to Cat 5, you look at the cables, you're going to go, they look the same. Actually, if you look at the twist, you'll see they're not as many twists in each of the pairs, and the pairs are not twisted together as often because you got both twists occurring in there. Cat 3 cable is still used out there, although it's disappearing. It's used for telephone cable. Okay? That you'll see Cat 3 a lot of times used for that. But it will only support 10 megabits per second. So that's the limitation and why it's gone to just being used for that. Most cases now, if you're doing new wiring of a facility and you're putting in for a telephone and you're putting in for the computers, you're going to do it all as Cat 5 or Cat 6.
The
telephones with the Cat 5 or Cat 6 also, because it can run through them better. And then if you go to switch your systems, like we've done here at school, from one to the other, they'll work perfectly fine for us to then use voice over IP going through it, because we're running as data across it. And if you decide you don't need the telephone sitting there anymore, you've got another data connection already sitting there for you that you just got to change the plugs on it for you. Okay? And works fine. So thereby wire it all with both ways with both the same higher level cable to it. There is Cat 5 and Cat 5e. Cat 5e just gave more twist on it and gave better ability to run the 100 megabits per second and to actually run the 1,000 megabits per second. It really wasn't intended for 1,000, but it's running 1,000 on. Cat 6 is going to run the 1,000 better for you. This building, we should have Cat 6 in here, but I don't know if they ran 6 or not. Because I saw them running some 6 on the other campus when they ran the cabling to our wireless connections at Walker. They put Cat 6 on that they ran along to get to the wireless access points, but the rest of the place is Cat 5. So you've got those out there. Computer plugs with that 4 pairs, the 8 wires, is going to be RJ45 plugs on it. Telephone connections actually used only 6 of the wires, so they've got RJ11 plugs on them. They're a little bit smaller than the RJ45s. Know those 2 numbers because sometimes I've seen those pop up on tests and certifications of RJ11 versus RJ45. The Cat 3, I say, is mostly used for voice communication now. Cat 5 and Cat 5e will support up to 1,000 megabits per second. Cat 6, which you saw, actually will support up to 10 gigabits per second, although they're not recommending 10 gigabits per second on it, but it's used on that. And now you've got 40 out there using wiring also, but you really got to go to the Cat 7 to do that. Okay? And I haven't seen any Cat 7 yet, so I haven't been able to get a hold of a piece of Cat 7. A piece of Cat 6 y'all looked at actually goes back to 1999 when it was brand new, and there was a place in Athens, Georgia, that a law office there that they went to network their office, and that the guy that owned it told the network people coming in to network the thing that he wanted the best thing you could get. And they said, but it'll cost you money. And he said money was no object. He wanted whatever was the best to last for a long time. And they wired them with Cat 6 cabling. I had a student that was working in that office, and she brought me a piece of the cable that they had laying around. And so I got that piece of Cat 6 then. I got a piece of Cat 6 laying on my desk at Walker that's from when we put in the wireless over there. I told the guy when I was watching him roll it down the hall and saw this Cat 6 and said, can I get a piece of that from y'all? Oh, extra piece that you cut off. He said, I can give you a piece however you want off of this, because he said, y'all bought the whole spool anyway, and y'all aren't going to use the whole spool. And he cut me off a piece about that long for me. When I told him what I wanted it for, he said, I'll give you a piece, no problem. He said, even if this wasn't the school spool that I was charging on it, I'd still cut you off a piece and give it to you, and not charge them for the foot or two that I gave you. Cat 5 cable, you can go to Home Depot, Lowe's, and buy it there 1,000 foot at a time, or get them cut smaller pieces. It usually runs somewhere between $65 and $100 for 1,000 feet for a box of it. Depends on what the price of copper is and what the price of oil is. Those 2 things are affecting it. It's got plastic on the outside and copper running through it. Those 2 factors, depending on how those are running, affects the price of it. But for years now, I've seen the price depending on whenever you went in, fluctuates pretty much between $65 to $100 for 1,000 feet. All right, questions on all the cabling? Y'all get the idea of? You get the idea of the distances involved? Know the 100 meters on the twisted pair. You will encounter that one quite often enough. And you will find places that they're not getting very good signal and discover they ran their segments more than 100 meters long. And then you go, whoa, we got to put some more switch boxes along for it to go from box to box to regenerate it as it goes. So all you got to do is get it regenerated to go further. And then you've got full signal going again, and then it will start disappearing as it goes down the line. All right. I think that's basically it for the chapter. As far as exactly how we're going to hook the things up, they show you also about the 568A and 568B. You're going to learn to make both of those connectors for the twisted pair with the RJ45 later. In a black and white picture, it really doesn't show very well about it. So that basically, and you don't have to remember on this, but we're going to do a white, orange, orange, white, green, blue, white, blue, green, white, brown, brown, and then on straight through cables, same thing on both ends. What we're going to do it is 568B on both ends. It could be 568A on both ends also, but back originally they said 568B, and I'm staying with the original standard. But A's on both ends will work just as well. It's the same thing. And then on the crossover cable, which you'll use to connect like devices or devices that are on, both of them are on odd number layers of the OSI model, or both of them are on even number layers of the OSI model, will require a crossover cable to connect them together, because you're having the two devices have got using the same pins to send on, and you've got to switch the wire in the process, or you're sending to sending and receiving. Not going to be much communication on that. You got to do send to a receive and a send to a receive. So crossover takes care of that. On the modern switches and routers, they will actually, the high-end ones, they'll have a MDIX connections there, and then they'll actually look at it and go, what is it sending on from the other device, and switch itself on which pins, and it can actually use a straight through cable to connect modern routers and switches to other routers and switches, or another PC into a router. And that it picks it up with and does the adaptation to it. So there's not much need for a crossover anymore unless you're connecting PC to PC. Okay? In which case you've got to use a crossover. Rollover cable, which y'all are also going to make, is a Cisco proprietary cable. It's just used for the console ports, like I mentioned in here back at the beginning of the course. It's used for disconnecting into the console ports as a semi-security type thing to it. And that's what Cisco has done, and Cisco proprietary. And all it does is it just switches pin 1 through 8 through to the dead opposite. So pin 8 on this end matches to pin 1 on this end, and the other way around for the other end. It's just a straight out cross. 1 to 8, 2 to 7, 3 to 6, and so on. To follow on that. When you make it, that you'll do a 568B on both ends also. It's just we'll put the plug on upside down on one end. Or you can sit there and do the wires backwards if you want. But the easier one is put the plug on upside down, and then you're doing the colors exactly the same. So when we do the cables, 5 out of 6 ends are going to be 568B. One end is going to be a 568A. To do the 3 different type cables. So they do mention that one here, and they mentioned the 3 types of cables too. You will also see the straight through cables, as they note here in the book that they call them Ethernet straight through cables. Sometimes you will see people just reference an Ethernet cable when they're saying about an Ethernet cable, or that you need an Ethernet cable. They're saying a straight through cable normally. Okay? Did find one exception. I was installing a firewall for an organization, and it was a good firewall we were putting in there, and directions said distinctly to hook the switch that was hooking to it with an Ethernet cable, and included in the box a straight through cable. And it would not work for me. And I'm sitting there going, that's not the cable it should be, but that's what you're telling me is a straight through cable, but we're connecting to similar devices, so it shouldn't be a straight through cable, but maybe you got the intelligent port, but I didn't see anything telling me it had an intelligent port, but I tried doing what they said to do, and it would not work. And I called support on it going, this does not, y'all's box is not working. And the guy said, are you using an Ethernet cable on it? And I go, yes. And then as I talked to him, and I went, my experience is this should be a crossover cable instead of a straight through cable, but y'all put a straight through cable in here, and you've said use an Ethernet cable, which is a straight through. I said, it's like your box is bad, but I'm wondering actually that that's the only other thing in my mind. And the guy went, it's an Ethernet cable, but it uses these pins, and started to tell me on how it did, and I went, wait a minute, you're describing a crossover cable to me. And he said, it's an Ethernet cable. And I said, well, you got to distinguish which one when you're not talking about the standard one. I proceeded, I said, that's fine, if that's the problem, and I hung up. Went out, got my toolkit out of my car, and the cable I had in the car, made a crossover cable, hooked it up, and it was solved. And what I had been thinking from 2 hours before could save me all the work of 2 hours if they had written directions correctly. Or if I had to just follow my own intuition on it, that I was going, they should know what they're saying in their directions, and I was following their directions of installing the equipment. And they were saying a crossover cable was an Ethernet cable. Well, if you notice here, the book says it's an Ethernet crossover, but if you say Ethernet, usually you're reading a straight through. But they're both used for Ethernet purposes, but basically, really, the straight through is the one that's used for Ethernet, really. Crossover is just for connecting right devices together.
Crossover is A to B.
Mm-hmm. So one end's got A, one end's got B.
And you just switch your green and your orange.
You're switching the green and the orange, is all you're doing. So when we go through learning on it, and y'all don't have to memorize the colors either, when y'all go to do it again at the end, I'll let you have written down what the color codes are. Okay? You may actually even have it written on the board. I've been known to have left it written on the board for the students. Of the color codes on that. Because the object is for you to learn how to do the cable. Y'all can go look up the colors on the internet with no problem. Also, y'all, I'm going to demonstrate that to y'all in here. So I will show you how to do it. There's also PowerPoint out there of me showing how to do the cabling. I think there's a video of me doing it. Actually, the PowerPoint's not of me doing it. That's me taking a picture of a girl that was in my class back 10 years ago doing it. And she sat there, and I kept taking pictures of her hands as she worked on it. So it shows you a close-up with fingers working together doing it, not where we're holding it in front of us. Maybe a picture in there also of me holding it up of where of how they're organized on it, but beyond that, it's mostly you're looking at wires and hands. Now I say, I think I may have a video out there too on it. Okay? And then I've got it written up for you. Because the ones that are taking the online class have to come in and do that cabling also. So they'll be setting up times and whatever day I decide we're going to work on it, I'm going to post a note to them telling them I'm doing it that day if anyone just come sit in class that day and join us. Other questions? So somewhere in the next week or two, we'll throw that in one day. That'll be our work for that day. Because I really thought it was over in chapter 6 or 7. That's where it used to be. Now they've moved it back here. And I didn't set it for you. And that counts as one of your labs. Counts the same as a packet tracer. And then when you do it at the end, that's 10% of your full break in the class. When you do the last one, which we'll do in the last week of the day. The final one has to be done. Because you have to do that lab final, which is doing the cables. If you don't do it, you will fail the class. And you have to do the first one before you can do the final. So you have to do this teaching one before you do where you demonstrate. And they have to be separate days. So if you skip the day next, whenever we do it in here, you're going to have to set up a time with me to come do it and get it done before the end of the semester. If you don't get that first one done, I'm not going to let you do the second one until you're done, and they've got to be on 2 different days. So if had students go, I'm just going to put it off and then I'll try to do it, I'll get to do it all together in the same hour on the last day. So I got to stop on that one now. All right, then I will see y'all on Tuesday. Just as a reminder to you, Monday is a school day. It is a national holiday also, because it's President's Day. So if you've got classes on Monday, you still have class.
Showing his lab and check the working on
Go get some rest.
Yeah, no kidding. I've tossed and turned from 3 o'clock this morning.
You got the inventory. So if you go to the modules, you go to the module course. There you go. Now, you'll go down to the bottom, there's a shortcut where you go, if you click on, is that the next step? Yeah, click on course index. Right here, lab index. Go down to chapter 4. Here. Click on that 4.2.4 down there at the bottom. Right here. No, wait a minute. That's the wrong one. Put on calculator. Close that.
We'll see you next Tuesday.
Somebody else. Oh, well, there's our problem. We don't want lab, we want packet tracer index. Now we're gonna have a work. That's it. Okay?
and then you just download these two.
Well, you don't need to download them, but
Just the
download
PPA
the
file.
PPA because it includes instructions inside of it.
Okay.
Okay.
Are you going to be on campus Monday?
No. Because Monday and Wednesday, I'm not there. Monday and Wednesday, I've got class all day here. Tuesday and Thursday, I'm usually there in the afternoon.
All right.